If you're not actually planning on being transparent, don't say you are. Hello and welcome back to the Marcus Williams Training Academy podcast, where we talk all things misconduct. Today is another episode of our series of segments called If I Were in Charge. Now, I say that tongue-in-cheek because I know that it's a lot easier said than done. It's a lot easier for me to tell you what to do than to actually implement it. But these are things that you, if you are in a position of leadership, you need to think about. You need to consider implementing in your organization. And if you're not, if you don't have any authority or power, bring it to the people who do. Encourage them to listen to this podcast or take these ideas, and you can claim them for your own. But these are ways to deal with or respond to misconduct that will make your organization more effective and will build trust, not only in the area of misconduct, but overall. Today's episode, we are going to be talking about transparency, why it's important to be transparent, and how that builds trust. Do you think that employees today demand transparency more than employees did in the past? I think the answer to that question is yes. We'll talk about that. But before we do, please subscribe. Whether you are listening in your favorite podcast app or watching the video, subscribe and make sure that you hit the notification button so that you know when new episodes drop. Okay, so to start with our discussion on transparency, let's talk about a classic film. Let's talk about The Wizard of Oz. Whether you've seen the movie or you've read the book, let's talk about this a little bit and the importance or the effect of transparency. So Dorothy lands in Oz, and she's told that the only way to get home is to go talk to the Wizard of Oz. And so she starts on this journey. And the entire story is about her journey to Oz to meet the wizard so that he can help her get home. And she meets the Tin Man, and she meets the Cowardly Lion, and she meets the Scarecrow, and they all learn things about each other and about themselves, and it's this growth journey. It's this hero's quest. And they finally go through the field of poppies, and they reach the land of Oz, and it's amazing and it's great, and they get to the wizard's room. And this great wizard on the wall is speaking in this loud, resounding, echoing voice, and speaking in being mean, and I can't help you, you're just a lowly girl. And then Toto, the dog, goes and pulls back the curtain, and they look in, and it's just some old guy. It's just some regular old human being who also found himself in Oz one day and created this legend about himself. And the legend traveled far and wide that he was a wizard and that he was powerful, and all along he knew he wasn't. He knew he didn't have the power or the attributes that they gave to him, but he played along with it anyway. He kept himself behind the curtain in secret to hold on to that power, that prestige. But that prestige came with a price. He was alone behind the curtain. And Dorothy found that she didn't need him at all. She was already possessing what she needed to return home. She just had to click the heels of her slippers and say, there's no place like home. She never needed the wizard. So she learned and she became empowered to actually fulfill her dreams, fulfill her goals on her own without the wizard, because suddenly there was transparency. He became more honest about who he was. He was able to finally rejoin the community. He wasn't alone anymore. And she was able to go home, all because of a curtain that was pulled back. The situation became more transparent. So let's talk about current events a little bit. Let's talk about, the election, presidential election 2020. And I'm not going to get into politics. I'm not going to favor one side or the other in this discussion, but I am going to talk about the impact of transparency on the election and on trust. Elections in a democracy work because the populace trusts the outcome. They trust the process and they trust the outcome and therefore accept it. They accept their new leader because they accept and trust the process. We're a couple of weeks out from the election, and there are still millions of people who don't trust the outcome. And whether the outcome is correct or not, again, I'm not making that judgment. But what I'm saying is when you have video of people putting up physical barriers, cardboard on the windows so that others can't see what is happening. When you have accusations that poll watchers were kept back where they couldn't watch, that doesn't mean that the people counting the ballots were doing anything wrong or counting them improperly or cheating in any way. But what it does do is it erodes trust. Because people then ask the question, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, why can't I watch you? Why are you covering the windows if you have nothing to hide? It's that same old argument is if you have the only reason people hide, the only reason people close their doors or shut their windows is because they're doing something wrong or nefarious that they're trying to hide. So those simple actions, while they don't actually prove that anything bad or nefarious was happening, they eroded trust. There are millions of people who somehow will have to regain trust in the system because of that. And it really doesn't matter who you voted for, that because every election is new. It's new. And if you don't trust it this time, how are you going to trust it the next time? And it's all because people took steps to stop others from seeing. They took steps to make the process more opaque instead of more transparent. So from this article, May 1st, 2019, from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Institute, employees demand transparency. And it's saying that employees today are demanding more and more transparency from their employers. And the author says, I know this makes many managers nervous, not because they have something to hide. Again, going back to those election actions, it doesn't mean you have something to hide. It's just not something we've had very much experience doing. Many leaders have operated under the assumption that they didn't need to tell their employees when their organization was experiencing problems. They thought they were doing their employees a favor by hiding the bad news. I've experienced this as I worked. When the government was going through budget cuts, when there were policy changes coming, where senior leaders failed to tell us their leadership was trust us instead of, hey, this is what we're dealing with. This is what's going on. It may not be okay. There may not be a good answer to this. So it may hurt. We may have to furlough you. We may have to cut here and there. But instead, they just said, trust us and trust that, we're doing what's best. Well, that's how you lose trust. They could have gained trust instead by telling us up front that there were issues that they were dealing with and they're doing their best and these are the things they're looking into and these are the things they're trying to fix. In this article, they gave some suggestions. If you want to have a more transparent organization, some things to try. Be open. Communicate as often and as openly as you can. Keep your commitments. If you tell your team you're going to be open with them, do it. That's really important. If you're not actually planning on being transparent, don't say you are. Encourage your managers to share openly. Train them to be as transparent as possible. Let them know what they can share and what they can't. Sometimes managers don't know that they're allowed to share things. They believe that they can't because that's how they have experienced it coming up in the organization. Address rumors before they get too far in the organization. That's important, especially when you're dealing with misconduct. Rumors about what allegations, what someone did or didn't do. You need to address those. You need to get ahead of them. And if you hear these and it's something that needs to be investigated, you need to jump in and do it before it ruins someone's career, before it ruins their position. Model transparency. So if that's one of your values, then do it and show others how to do it. Those are some great suggestions. So from Paychex Works, they actually did a survey about transparency, exploring the role and effect of transparency in today's workplace. They surveyed over 1,100 U.S. employees and nearly 200 managers to gauge the importance of transparency in different aspects of the organization. I want to go over a couple of those things just kind of to show you how the need or the demand for transparency has evolved. They found that nearly 3 in 4 employees wanted more transparency from their employers. So even where they're at today isn't enough. 3 in 10 employees had left a job due to an employer's lack of transparency on job growth. So just being more transparent could have kept them. Honesty is the best policy applies to nearly every area of life, including business. According to our study, employers were the most transparent about job growth and opportunities, salaries, and the hiring process. However, less than 50% of employees said their employer practiced transparency in each area. So the areas in which employers were most transparent, their employees still felt they weren't transparent enough. So they still hadn't gotten to a good balance, to a good spot. So you can't be transparent about everything. You can't be transparent about personal information, but there are things that you can be more transparent about than you already are. And there are things that maybe you think that you can't, that information you think you should have to hold closely, that you really don't need to. So here's a graph. What decision making did employees get the most transparency on? So percentage of employers who were moderately or very transparent on disciplinary actions was 47%. Percentage of employees deeming of transparency important in that was 66%. So 47% were transparent, whereas 66% said it was important. So we're not matching up yet. We're still not there. We're better, but we're still not there. And that's on disciplinary actions. People want to know what other employees are getting disciplined for. They want to know what's going on around them. Do they need to look out for something? Are there traps or mistakes that they could make that could get them in trouble as well? And you don't have to give all the details. I know there are people who want all the dirty details. They want, oh yeah, well, what did this person do? And who was involved? And they want all of these details. They don't need all of that. But why can't you share this employee was caught stealing, or this employee was caught misrepresenting their work on their time cards, or doing personal business at work, or whatever it was, and they got suspended, or they got 2 days unpaid leave, or they were fired, or they got a warning. Just to let people kind of gauge and know that you take misconduct seriously, but at the same time, you're also fair, that you also look at, if you start saying this person used the printer for a personal project and they were fired, and then someone else was accused of assault and they got 3 days without pay, then you're going to have a problem. And I think that's why some businesses are afraid of being transparent about disciplinary actions, because they know they're not actually being equitable. They're taking employees that they like, employees that are top performers, and they are not punished as harshly or disciplined as harshly as someone else. And employees are going to see this. So this is not only a way to be more transparent, it's to keep you honest. It's to keep you looking at things, not treating different people differently, because that's going to get you in trouble as an organization. If it comes out that you are treating certain types of people more leniently than others, suddenly you are going to have all sorts of discrimination complaints against you. So if you know that the numbers are getting out, if you know that the disciplinary action is going to be published, you're going to think twice before you let your friend or your buddy get off easy for something that someone else was punished very harshly for. So it's actually an equalizing factor. You still, in leadership, you still have the authority to do that discipline, to enact that discipline, but there's this balance, there's this check to make sure you are being equitable with everyone in the company, and you're not discriminating against certain employees or certain groups of people. So does transparency impact satisfaction? And this study actually went into that as well. So percentage of people who are satisfied with their job or with their employer, with their job, with their salary. And basically what it says, if there's no transparency, satisfaction was always consistently lower. So for example, with their job, if there's no transparency, 56.8% of people were satisfied with their job. If there was moderate or very transparent, then 83.3%. So just by being transparent, you're jumping from 56% satisfaction up to 83% satisfaction. And here's, I don't want to call it a secret because it shouldn't be a secret, but it's something that leaders tend to forget, that employees talk to each other. It used to be that it was bad form to talk about salary, to talk about money. People do it all the time. They compare how much they're making. They compare their salary. They see someone doing the exact same job and find out that person is making a lot more money. They're going to ask why. Sometimes there's legitimate reasons. Sometimes it's because the person making more has 15 years more experience. They're able to do the job without as much supervision, without requirement for management to supervise them. So even though it's the same job, they're worth more money because of their experience and their abilities. But other times, there are situations where two people have the same level of education, the same level of experience. One is getting paid more than the other. And again, is that because of some sort of discrimination? And how are you going to prove, if someone makes that allegation, that I'm getting paid less because I'm a woman, or I'm a person of color, or I have a disability, or one of the other protected classes? How are you going to prove that's not the case? Clearly, there's some sort of adverse action being taken because they're getting paid less when they have the same amount of experience than the other person. And they compare that too. They compare their experience. They know how much their colleagues make because they talk, and they know where they went to school. They know the jobs because they talk. They sit at work in the office all day and they talk to each other. And they ask those questions. They're not private. They post them on social media. So you can't hide things, your actions, and expect that your employees are also keeping the same secrets, because they're not. They're talking to each other. They're going out there, or they're doing their own little investigation on the side, digging through people's social media, etc. So the article also says transparency with employees can also play a major role in their satisfaction and commitment. Okay, so this is what we were talking about. Compared to just 54.4% of employees satisfied with their employer when transparency wasn't present, 84.2% of those with very transparent employers were satisfied. Job satisfaction had a similar pattern, with 83.3% of employees satisfied with their job when their employer was transparent. Okay, those are the numbers that we said. So there is a very definite relationship between the two. Here's another one interesting in the issue of misconduct. So what topics are managers most restricted on being transparent about? So they're not allowed to talk about it. The most restricted thing was reasons colleagues have been fired. Now, we can understand that. And especially if you're a human resources professional listening to this, you know there are things that you can and cannot say, and that you're walking on some pretty thin ice when you start saying why a person was fired. But there are things you can share. You can share stats on misconduct. You can talk about some, so instead of going for this all or nothing approach, look at the things that you can share. And by doing that, you may be helping someone else avoid doing that in the future. Someone who may be on their way down that path will say, whoa, I can lose my job for this? You're having to hire someone new. It saves the misconduct from happening just by being a little bit more open and transparent than you already are. And then down the list, disciplinary actions was at 7.9%, whereas the firing was at 32.1%. So it looks like managers aren't being told they can't share disciplinary actions as much, but it's still an issue. It's still something that needs to have more transparency. We all know there are specific things that you can't share, and I just said that. So I'm not advocating that you find loopholes or that you share personal information, because you're going to lose trust that way as well. And this whole exercise or this whole thing is about building trust. If people know how you are dealing with misconduct on the back end, those decisions, the disciplinary decisions, then they're going to be more likely to trust you to handle it when it happens to them. And that's a recurring theme throughout all of my trainings and podcasts on properly responding to misconduct, is when people trust when you have a policy or process in place and people trust it because you follow it consistently, they're more likely to come to you for help, and therefore you are more likely to be able to eradicate the misconduct. There is a warning here in this report. It says, however, while transparency is an overwhelmingly good thing, there is a right and a wrong way to go about it. Employers should know where to draw the line and how to effectively deliver information, both good and bad. Some information you can deliver over an email, some requires a meeting, some should be done in person, some could be in a quarterly newsletter. It's important to communicate it effectively and in a way that gets your point across. It is a tightrope. It is a balance that you have to walk to do it properly. But the dividends for being more transparent will pay off. They are much higher. Employees today are demanding it. They're willing to leave a job that they otherwise like if their employer is not transparent. And I showed you the studies here, and you can look in the link in the description to find the link to the actual study if you want to look at it even more. Bottom line, takeaway, if I were in charge, again, because that's the title of this series, I would ensure that I was as transparent as legally possible with my employees. We're all on the same team. We're all working together to achieve the same goals. We have the same mission statement and values. And the way someone can become a part of the team is when you trust them with information, when you allow them into that circle. You don't have to give them all the secrets. They have their job, you have yours. But be transparent about how you are going to respond to misconduct, what you are going to do, what your process is, what an investigation looks like, whether your investigator is trained or not, what kind of training they went to. And then when the process starts, what happens next? What do we expect? How long is it going to take? All of the different questions that you have, don't be afraid to answer them. Be open about it. And that can start by just sharing your statistics on disciplinary actions, on what you do and how you respond to misconduct. No one is going to want to come to you with misconduct or allegations if they don't trust you're going to do the right thing. By being transparent, you can build that trust. Okay, thank you for listening to this episode on transparency. I hope that it has caused you to think about it a little bit and how it works in your organization and whether or not you need to be more transparent. Again, if you're not in that position of leadership, but you would like your employer to be more transparent, share this with them or share the ideas, share the link, show them the statistics from this study. Thanks again for watching or listening, and I will see you next time on the Marcus Williams Training Academy podcast.